This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry with agriculture broadcasters Orion Samuelson and Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH and your local Case IH dealer.
Supply chain disruptions continue to raise costs for American farmers. Hello, folks. Thanks for tuning in to This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson here in the studio this week, but we'll be hearing from Max Armstrong and Orion Samuelson a little bit later on in the program. Before we do, though, there are continuing concerns about supply chains in this country. Most recently, rail traffic has come under fire. The National Grain and Feed Association last week wrote a letter to the Surface Transportation Board asking them to look into this issue. Joining us now is CEO Mike Seifert of the National Grain and Feed Association. And Mike, tell us, what kind of service disruptions have your members reported?
It's several-fold. One is that we've heard at some elevators in the Midwest and processing facilities having to temporarily suspend taking deliveries from producers because they're full, can't move out finished product or can't move commodities out. We've received numerous reports of feed suppliers unable to get corn, other goods in for feed, having to trim back rations on animals and/or enforce force majeure parts of contracts due to being unable to deliver goods. We've heard of some fuel facilities having to curtail production on ethanol, and we've heard of vessels in the PNW, in particularly having to wait to be filled for export because they can't get the shuttle trains in to get those vessels filled.
Mike, is this a localized issue to one geography or to one carrier, or is this widespread through the industry?
This is widespread. It's being particularly exacerbated on the West Coast, California, PNW, but much of that is due to delays in shipments and deliveries coming out of the Midwest, but we're also hearing significant issues in the Southwest and in the Southeast. And so it really has become more of a system-wide issue than a regional issue.
Mike, supply chains have been a concern for the past 2 years. Is this the first time your members have really confronted disruptions here on the rail side?
There's been brief interruptions in the past 2 years, particularly with COVID. I think anybody involved in the shipping or the transportation business has done that. But we have noticed a large increase in the severity of the situation and what our members are experiencing, particularly over the last 3 to 4 weeks, which has really taken it up to a new level in which, many of my members, a lot of them who aren't the type of folks who necessarily cry fire, are saying that it's the worst they've seen in 30, 40-year careers working in the industry.
Mike, what are some of the reasons you've heard for these backlogs?
I think it's twofold. One is obviously you've got a tremendous amount of product moving. We're all aware of those supply chain issues. And then you've got many of the railroads have implemented new operating systems where they've worked to reduce crews and the amount of time that trains are in certain areas, which that's worked well until we've had hiccups, weather issues, crew issues. And then we're also hearing from a number of them that, just like other industries, coming out of COVID and dealing with COVID, that they've seen significant reductions in their crews, and now they're having trouble. Significant numbers were furloughed, and in some instances, a number of those furloughed employees have decided not to come back, and so they're short on crews that way. And as you can imagine, and we will admit as well, you have to go through a certain level of training for crews before you can put them out on the rail system, and so that's certainly a problem as well.
So from the NGFA perspective, what were you asking the Surface Transportation Board to do in your letter?
Sure. What we asked STB to do in our letter was basically to convene the railroads and have them develop operating plans to basically establish minimal levels of service so we can get things moving again and start working to address this issue. But also so that we have a plan for moving forward, particularly as we get into harvest, to try and address some of these issues. But then to also ask STB to have them start filing annual operating plans to give us a sense of how we can address these issues moving forward. And then that was in that letter. There's a number of other issues STB's been looking at, including reciprocal switching and rate reform, which would allow challenging of what we consider unfair rates that we think would be good things for STB to look at as well.
Lots of things developing in that transportation space. Thanks to Mike Seifert, CEO of the National Grain and Feed Association, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer. Well, this week, all eyes have been on the USDA, as on Thursday they released two closely watched reports, Prospective Plantings and Quarterly Grain Stocks. To make sense of those numbers for us this week, Tommy Grizzoffi of Advanced Trading joins us from Fargo, North Dakota. Tommy, let's look at Prospective Plantings first. There was a big surprise on there. Where did soybean acres come in?
Oh, the soybean acres, it was a shift of a couple million acres, so a couple million higher than expected. Now, the analysts had that soybean number all over the place. My gut was telling me we'd plant less corn, but then I had a great farmer tell me last night, he scared me out of being bullish in corn. He said, the American farmer loves to plant corn. So we do need to warn everyone that these are prospective plantings. It's very cold out in the Midwest. Things can still change. But as you know, my friend, we don't have a lot of fertilizer to go around to switch back. So the easy play and the mathematics of the market actually worked, where, hey, fertilizer's high. What do? We plant more soybean acres. So looking at a few million more soybean acres and a few million less corn acres, and that had a dramatic effect on the market, my friend.
Well, and Tommy, it has been quite a few years, I believe, since we have seen more planted acres to soybeans than to corn. Is that right?
That is correct. And I noticed some people mocking King Corn on Twitter, and we love to say King Corn. And we will be King Corn again. And unfortunately, if we're talking about this in a few years and we're King Corn, possibly markets could be a lot lower, because as the market's sending a signal to the world, we need more corn. But as you know, it's very difficult to put big yields up without fertilizer. So we need more fertilizer before we can grow more corn. You see the shift to beans. The results are out. Today's over. We move on from here, my friend.
Tommy, you're up in North Dakota. I know you talked to a lot of growers who are in that spring wheat country. We did see a little bit lower than expected spring wheat acreage. Does that fall in line with what you've been hearing from your friends up there in North Dakota?
It does. And I did a marketing meeting in Maddock, North Dakota the other night. And there's so many choices. Let me just take a few minutes or a few seconds to educate people. But we can plant canola, flax, barley, edibles, oats. There's so many contracts up here we can grow. We're also coming back from that horrible drought of 2021. So our friends up in Canada, big drought. North Dakota, big drought. It looked like beans were the easier play. I have some clients who are pretty big wheat farmers who switched to almost 100% beans, and you're seeing that in the USDA numbers today, my friend.
Wow. Tommy, as you look out, now that we've got this sense of certainty from the USDA, at least we have a baseline for these acreages heading into the summertime, how does that change the market conversation now that we've got more bean acres, for example, than corn?
Well, we're not out of the woods yet. The next 45 days, 60 days, with what's happening with Ukraine, not only do we need to talk about America's acres, but what is Ukraine going to get planted? What is Ukraine going to get fertilized? How are trade talks going to go across the world? How are we going to feed the people? A lot of talk about food inflation, food scarcity. So the world's looking at these numbers, and we're going to have to digest them over the next few days. It's a starting point. It's not a finishing point. It'll be interesting to see what happens. It's cold in the Midwest. I'm already concerned that if we have any weather problem, we very possibly could see the most dynamic corn market ever in history.
So how should producers handle that, Tommy? Do we just sit on our hands right now and see how things play out?
So now you're asking the hard questions. I like to get a little forward sold and buy some calls and call spreads to keep that upside. Also, what you're afraid to forward sell, and I can understand why you're afraid to forward sell, throw a put under the market. You have your crop insurance, cover that gap between where crop insurance is and that put, roll that put option up as the market gives you that opportunity. We need to get the crop planted and then some rain on it. It's a long growing season, my friend.
Yeah, it certainly is. There is a lot of that season left ahead of us. We'll be back for more conversation with Tommy Grizzoffi of Advanced Trading. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Harvey Firestone invented the first pneumatic farm tire, forever changing what it means to farm hard. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more about this history and tire solutions for today. And we're talking markets with Tommy Grisafi of Advanced Trading. We discussed the Prospective Plantings report. Let's turn our eye to the other report that came out on Thursday, Tommy, which was quarterly grain stocks. Sometimes can be a big surprise tucked into that report. Not so this year, it seems.
We had a plethora of information come out, Mike, and it's a lot to digest. I have to tell you, I was extremely nervous going into this report because as markets go up, you start to wonder, how much demand destruction are we having? Who can really afford $7.50 corn and upper 16, lower 17 bushel beans? Who can afford $12 wheat? So, the higher prices are nice for people who have grain left. But in the end, it's going to be a heck of a party. But we're going to have a little hangover after this. And so we may have another year, 18 months to this bull market. But boy, are we sending out a signal to the world to plant more. And when that happens, when we plant more and Mother Nature decides we're going to grow more, we're going to see what happened a little bit today, where we have a little bit of extra. So when you look at the ending stocks, we had a little extra corn, a little extra beans, wheat about the same. That could change dramatically in months and years to come.
Tommy, as you think about demand for grains, particularly U.S. grains on the world market, it seems like we're still seeing export business look pretty good to China. Do you think that's going to continue?
I do, my friend. There's a lot of tension in the world. And of course, the red phone behind me, China doesn't call me before they buy, nor does the president or Putin call before they make major decisions. So yes, the world needs grain. I think China will be involved. You're also going to see countries you're not used to seeing come to America. I hope we don't have a panic. I hope the markets stay orderly and the function of the market, the Chicago Board of Trade and the CME Group work. I didn't like that price action that we had in the wheat where we trade up $3, $4 in a week. That wasn't good for the world, and it wasn't good for a lot of people, my friend.
No, that is true. Certainly scared a lot of folks who got caught in that squeeze. Tommy, you mentioned inflation is a factor all around the world. We're seeing it perhaps most pronounced in energy prices and fuel prices. President Biden this past week announced a large dispersal from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Is it enough to do anything for prices at the pump?
It is, and the price at the pump's coming down. I traveled a little bit last week. I paid as high as $4.50 for gas. I filled up today, $3.75. That's before the recent $7 price break that we had in the last 24 hours. It will help. Now, the thing you need to watch, and he just mentioned it in his speech, President Biden, is what other countries are going to release from their strategic oil reserve. So we'll see what happens. Some people are laughing. They're saying it's just a chance for China to back the bus up and buy a bunch more oil. But let me remind everyone that front month oil was trading $20, $30 higher than back month. So what they're going to do is sell the world their higher oil, and they're going to replace it in 3 to 6 to 9 months with oil that you can see in the futures market is already more affordable.
All right. Well, Tommy, looking at more affordable, I'm sure American consumers would love some cheaper beef. Where do you see this cattle market heading over the summer?
We'll take cheaper beef, chicken, pork, but don't get mad at me. We're just trying to feed the world. Cattle has a problem. Cattle's problem is that we have a corn market that's on fire. And so you got to watch corn, you have to watch soybean meal, and you have to watch corn for multiple years. You saw weakness in the front on the cattle on the initial spike up in corn. But towards the end of the day, you saw strength in the back months. So for cattle to be profitable, we're going to keep rallying those back months. Keep an eye. When you look at the market, don't just look down at your phone and look at the front months. Look at them all. What's the market telling you? And pay attention, my friend.
All right. Lots and lots of things to digest here in these very volatile markets. We certainly appreciate Tommy Grisafi of Advanced Trading taking the time to talk to us.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform. Combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability.
Agriculture and construction are two industries where the workers rely on a lot of heavy equipment. And in both industries, that equipment has been modernizing at a very, very rapid pace. Our roving tech reporter Chad Colby had the chance to look up close at some new construction equipment, and he sent in this report.
You know me, I love equipment and I love technology. This past week, I was the guest of TCI Manufacturing in Nashville, Tennessee at the World of Asphalt Ag1's annual show. You may recognize that name. Every other year, I guess it's every 3 years, You may have heard of Con Expo in Las Vegas. This happens between those years. We'll be in Vegas next year. I can tell you this, a show like this puts a lot of great manufacturers in one location, but it also gives them a chance to showcase a lot of amazing technology. And whether that's simulators, new GPS systems, new automation for equipment, let me tell you, for a guy like myself who spent essentially a career in the ag industry, to come over and see that technology in construction, it's really a treat for me. I did have an opportunity to talk to Patrick Reaver, who's the president of TCI Manufacturing in Walnut, Illinois. I wanted a little more insight on what he's seeing at the manufacturer level.
TCI Manufacturing, we're based in Walnut, Illinois, about 2 hours west of Chicago, so rural, a lot of farm kids, a lot of local people that work there. So it's been a company that's been in business for 20 years, but has history going back over 50 years.
There's so much technology in the processing of aggregate. When you talk to veterans like Patrick, you realize really quickly that passion leads right into the technology.
I love processing aggregate, so it's a matter of how can we process aggregate in a more efficient way, allowing for the operator to be less involved in the dangerous environment.
With all the supply chain challenges, I was curious about how that affected manufacturing.
Right now we're trying to expand our production capabilities and really look at how can we provide more equipment to our end users. So, it's a tough job market out there. We're always hiring. We love getting new faces, but at the same point, we're trying to automate our facilities and make it manufacturing capabilities increase. Lead times are long, but we do our best to try to work with our customers. What makes America better than any other country in the world is our infrastructure. We have the best infrastructure system. If I want to get a product, maybe it's grain, maybe it's steel, maybe it's rock, and I want to get that from the East Coast to the West Coast, there's no other country like it. But you know what? That stuff needs some help, needs some TLC, right?
And let me guess, you got some equipment to do that, right?
We got all the equipment they need. That's right. Yes, we do.
Thank you, Chad. It's always incredible to see these big pieces of machinery up close. Folks, stay with us. Later on in the program, we're going to join the United Soybean Board and take a look at what they think the future might hold. Will demand be there for American bean growers? Stay with us on This Week in Agribusiness. Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Getting high-speed internet across rural America is a challenge, but it's something that's desperately needed for today's modern farming operations. One company working on bridging that divide is Microsoft. Mary Snapp said the company calls this their rural initiative, and she had the chance to speak with Max about tackling that challenge.
We know that we need to reach everybody across the country, and we up in the West Coast corner thought we were doing a pretty good job up there, but we know we need to get to the middle of the country too, and we know we can learn a lot from rural America. And so this is our effort to bring programs like expanding broadband, investing in youth like FFA and 4-H, supporting local news, and supporting digital skills so that people can get jobs in their communities, take advantage of the 21st century economy, and not have to leave where they are.
I did a little Twitter survey a few weeks ago about rural internet access, broadband access.
Yeah.
I was shocked.
Yes.
I think there were about 12% who said they virtually have no internet access out there in rural America.
That's exactly right. So we did some work about 4 or 5 years ago, and we learned that the FCC numbers were actually not right because of the way they count. And when we went out, we looked at how people were using our internet sites, and we saw major gaps. We discovered that there were 23, 24 million people who had no access at all. So we've developed a program called Airband to spotlight this. It's a pilot program using TV white spaces to bring internet access to some of those last mile places. But on the other hand, we know that there's lots of infrastructure money right now, and we're hoping that every state and every county a couple of years from now has that high-speed access that everybody needs to thrive.
The pandemic was a wake-up call, wasn't it, when we realized that families were trying to school their students with the internet that it wasn't there, or they drive into the McDonald's to hit the Wi-Fi.
They drive to the local McDonald's, they drive to the local high school, and it's just impossible for kids to have that same access to education without the ability to use the internet. So it did just highlight, among many other things, it highlighted what we call the gap in digital equity. And that's what we want to try to solve.
So many of our tools in agriculture today depend upon high-speed internet access, and the giant strides would be welcome. What's your gut feeling about that horizon out there, that we will have all of rural America wired to the internet the way we energized the rural areas with electricity some, 80 years ago?
Well, it is like the electrification of 80 years ago, actually. Internet is the electricity of our time today. And I'm super optimistic, but Microsoft can't do it alone. I mean, there is no way, or anybody can do it alone. It's going to take a coalition and a partnership of corporates, our internet service providers, county and state, and dollars from the feds and other places to get it done. And if the people in the community want to have it happen, that's the most important thing, and I think they do.
It's been a few years since the federal government proposed using the so-called white space between television channels to carry internet signals. Fear of interference between hospitals and television stations slowed the rollout of that technology. Max, thanks for bringing us that update. One thing we do need to update our audience on is the drought. This has intensified in the West. Joining me now is Greg Solier. Greg, as you look at the folks in the northern plains, I was in Montana last week talking to growers at the headwaters of the Missouri River. It's rough. Any relief in that part of the country in the short term?
Probably not the short term, even the medium and even longer range in that particular part of the country. Matter of fact, let's go and take a look at the latest drought monitor as a whole across the country. You really see it lined up from the Missouri River on westward. And speaking of the western states, from this perspective, there is big sky country and the worst of it with exceptional to extreme drought. I think it's somewhere around 86% of that western state region in some sense of a categorical moderate or severe drought. Note some modest improvement into the Pacific Northwest areas, sections of the Bitterroot Chain. And after we had a great December in California, moisture-wise, that was it for the rainy season, which has come to a conclusion. So that's how things play out across the western states. A couple other areas across the country where there has been improvement in the upper Midwest with weather systems, late season snow and snow melt, and certainly an easing of the frost levels as well. So we should continue to see improvement in this part of the country through especially the upper Mississippi Valley, the far north and northwestern Corn Belt locales. Another section of the country that bears watching after what was a wet fall season across coastal areas of the Carolinas down through Georgia and especially Florida. They have of late made good planting with corn and soybeans down that way, early start to it, but now into a wetter cycle, but much needed rainfall there. And more importantly here, as we wrap it up on the southern plains, one day it is a 95 degrees and a 50-mile-an-hour wind and smoke and fire everywhere. The next day it's snowing. No wonder you can't get any significant moisture, and this will be an ongoing problem, worsening in Oklahoma and Texas here in the weeks to come.
Now, that was going to be my next question, Greg. Where do you see relief coming in the long term for that region?
It will be for the upper Midwest, as we talked about, and with time through the northern and eastern Corn Belt locales. Matter of fact, probably going to end up being too much moisture. Matter of fact, I think we do have an drought outlook that we can take a look at, and you'll see into areas of big sky country, the Pacific Northwest. We talked about this back on the New Year's show. There will be continued improvement there, not where we need to be, but a general improvement. Same will apply to the Dakotas. You can see through the upper Midwest, and then orientation to the northern through eastern and southeastern Corn Belt locales where the specter of flooding may come into play. But where we see the worst of the drought, it will either stay that way, perhaps even worse in another category or two. So heads up there in the West.
Well, thank you, Greg. And folks, don't go away. Greg will be back with a full weather forecast when This Week in Agribusiness returns.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Thanks for joining us here on This Week in Agribusiness. What is the soybean market going to look like in a few years? That's a concern right now for the United Soybean Board. Will there be enough demand for American soybeans to make the business of growing soybeans profitable? The Chief Executive Officer of the USB had a chance to talk to us about their forward-looking efforts.
So we know that about 97% of the meal we sell goes into animal feed. The animal industry is our top customer. We also know that oil right now is selling itself. because of renewable diesel and biofuels. So what happens when we don't have these on-fire markets? How can we diversify our end uses to make sure that soybean remains one of the most flexible ingredient products on the market today?
That means research is needed in some areas?
It means research, it means partnerships with end-use companies and understanding what they need from us and going back to the drawing board and saying, okay, now we know their needs, how can we fulfill their needs in the best way with a renewable product? We are trying to replace petroleum as much as we can, and not only in fuel, but also in those petroleum byproducts that are used right now to make it more U.S. based and more renewable, and of course supporting the U.S. farmer.
You know, the Department of Energy website says there are more than 5,500 household uses for crude oil or natural gas that come to fruition through that petrochemical market. But it's a reminder of how many things can be made from soybeans.
Yeah, we have a very special project that the board voted to fund that does look at what petroleum byproducts are and what the potential market is for soybeans in each of those 5,000 plus uses. And we think that there are so many uncovered opportunities for us to use soybeans in many, many ways that we haven't. Soybeans are so flexible as a product.
There was a time when we'd hear about a possible new use and we'd think, oh, that's pie in the sky. Yeah. But some of these have really taken off and become significant when you put them all together.
Everybody here working the booth is wearing sneakers by Skechers that have soybean oil in the soles with a research and development project that was co-funded by USB and Goodyear. So when we think about, oh, we're going to put soybean oil in tires, how many more things can that soybean oil in tires, can that rubber-like product be used in after it's used in tires? And you think about everything that has that consistency of a sneaker sole, many, many opportunities in the future that we haven't even discovered yet.
Your board of directors, you and I have talked about this in the past. They're real thinkers on that board. The farm men and women who serve there bring a lot of ideas, I'm sure, to the table, and they very seriously weigh the expenditures you make.
You bet, even more now than in the past, I would say. We have an enormous board, a 78-member board. And the way to strengthen our decisions is to get every one of those 78 members with a good, clear understanding of the business environment currently around soy and in the future around soy. Bring all those ideas in, do some significant analysis of each and every idea, and find out where the best investment is for soybean farmers' profitability today and into the future.
You can learn more about the Soybean Checkoff Strategic Plan by visiting unitedsoybean.org.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Greg Solier joins me to take a look at the weather. And Greg, Pacific Northwest, they've been seeing some moisture. Does that continue into this next week?
It does. A parade of weather systems for, the past several weeks out there. Most of that moisture getting wrung out along the Cascades, northern Sierra, and points out of the west. Still ongoing dryness and drought issues over a fair amount of Big Sky country. We've seen some modest improvement east towards the Red River, but first, one day it's a milder flow off the northern and central Rockies. Nice recovery on temperature, softening grounds. The next day or later in the week, you get a shot of some late season cold spilling on southward, and you shift whatever moisture we come up with back over to snow. And that's the story here this week. Not a large scale system, but to stay up on this up and down temperature pattern here. Back to cooler, drier weather for Northern California, Pacific Northwest, and off we go into fieldwork season as well into that part of the country. Welcome to April, and welcome to the conclusion of the rainy season. What little there was, about a month's worth back in December. It's been downhill after that. No more than maybe 12, 13 inches water equivalency on the Sierra snowpack, and quickly coming on down, by the way. Here is the next weather system upstream north of the Four Corners. It will, as has been the case of these weather systems, drop into the central and southern high plains, lift to the north and northeast. We've seen some moisture. You don't like these temperature swings, nor one day it's a firestorm and a dust storm. The next you've got accumulating snow, but a ways to go before we get substantial drought improvement here. And it is a clockwise flow off the high high. Downwind of the Santa Ana conditions are going to be blowing big time there, Mike, into Southern California later this week.
Well, Greg, the Northern Corn Belt got some rain this past week. Do you see some dry time in their forecast?
Also got some snow as well, and boy, that rain was 1 to 2 in some spots, almost 3 inches in this particular corridor. We got some improvement a couple of weeks ago to maybe go kind of a test run of maybe your favorite Christmas toy equipment-wise out there. It's come to a halt, and here is the next weather system. This one is weak and fast-moving. Cold air here, warmth here, and the jet stream is digging and buckling like that, so you serve up, again, a series of these lows on the move. And once again, later in the week, rain over much of the eastern and southern Corn Belt, a shift to snow up towards the Sioux, the western Corn Belt, another shot of some cold air settling back into the northern and central plains. So active and moisture laden. Remember, we've talked about that on the extended outlooks here on this program. Well, we're back into a delightful go of it. Southern plains, maybe not necessarily with drought in mind. And of course, last week, another round, about the third or fourth week in a row of severe weather in the Arklatex, the Delta region, and parts of the deep south. Well, quiet in the early part of the week. The next weather system cranks up here with that digging jet into the Lone Star State. Ahead of it, showers and thunderstorms, heavy and severe. Boy, they made good progress, about half to 2/3 of that corn crop in the ground. Texas and Louisiana now into delay mode. Cleanup and recovery off the severe stuff as well. Note the shift from rain back over to snow again as far south as the Oklahoma Panhandle later in the week.
Greg, going up the Ohio Valley and eastward, what do you see coming next week?
Still got some dry areas, on the drought monitor from last week in these regions of the northeast and New England. What's left of the snow cover, snow melt is doing just that. A bit of rain early in the week, a shot of some cold air out towards the Sioux. Another big warm up. You note this temperature contrast. It's a trademark of springtime. Those jet stream winds in northwest to southeast, then buckle across the Corn Belt into the St. Lawrence River Valley. So it's a modest return on temperatures and plenty of moisture into the Lakes region, Ohio Valley as well, and a shift from the rain over to snow, northern and western Corn Belt, and a wide range of temperatures again anticipated, but trending cooler to colder across the Corn Belt. Some shower activity in the dry areas of Florida, mild conditions across the Carolinas. Here's that next weather system on the southern plains, breaking out more strong storms and severe storms into eastern Texas. It'll be a slow-moving feature, a southwest to northeast upper wind flow, showers and thunderstorms lined up from the Tennessee Valley down into the Arklatex and southward from there later in the week.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Greg, it looks like next week it might be the haves and the have-nots. For the moisture, who's going to get the rain?
Where we've seen it, and probably too much of it, there, Mike, across the southeastern plains into the Ohio Valley, the Tennessee Valley. Good progress prior to the past couple of weeks, and all this moisture, which once again plays out in the same corridor, Ohio Valley into eastern Texas, the southeastern part of the country. Remember, we've got some dry, drought-ridden areas here into the northeast of New England. We continue to make improvement with dryness and drought through parts of the northern and western Corn Belt locales, but here it is, and still not done with the S word. I know we are into April. Get used to it. Again, over sections of the upper Midwest, a couple of snow showers and flurries across the northern and central Rockies, quarter, maybe half inch as far south as northern California, and again, little to none as you get east of the Sierra and the Cascades.
Greg, that second week in April takes us to Easter. What do temps look like?
For some, you're going to have to find the warmer wardrobe over the Easter bonnet and your favorite wear for that holiday, because it is still cool, it is still cold, and it is still much like wintertime into the southeastern Canadian Prairie, St. Lawrence River Valley. Here's this northwest to southeast upper air flow. There is some warmth back along and west of the Missouri, with normal temperatures down through Florida and the southeastern part of the country, east around the 17th this year. And again, weather systems are going to run the trajectory of cold or a temperature contrast. Some good news here into parts of Montana through the upper Midwest. We will continue to see drought improvement here. Probably too much of a good thing with time in the Ohio Valley. Wet weather all the way down to the southeastern part of the country. High and dry, southwest high plains back into the valleys of California.
The week of April 18th, Greg, does that warm segment start to encroach on the rest of the country?
It's kind of basically going to hold pretty much sway, probably build southward as we kind of buckle the upper air pattern. You're going to see these cold air masses oscillate back and forth, running from about Lake Winnipeg into the St. Lawrence River Valley, then reverse course here, and this will be the pattern for springtime into early summer. And so warmth is back through the western states, Texas, and the southeastern part of the country. If you get good moisture here, and you will, probably too much of a good thing, good crop growth and emergence and development improvement there. Here is the moisture picture. Not bad for Big Sky Country. Good news with dryness and drought. Not good for early season field work here down across the Delta and points to the eastern states. Still little change from Texas back into California.
What do you anticipate as the calendar flips to May, Greg?
Still cool to cold air. These surges relative to springtime, but they are certainly steadfast here. Get used to it. Again, this is going to be a cool, wet spring, northern and eastern Corn Belt in the Ohio Valley. And look at the range of temperatures here with almost a summery feel down over the southeastern part of the country. You get that contrast. You get a busy and active moisture-laden weather pattern. Little field work across the Corn Belt.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
Well, even if you don't fall in love with a tractor, you may very well admire the play on words in its name. And in Max's Tractor Shed, brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. Maybe you saw those cabinets at the Louisville Farm Show or the Meekum Gone Farm and Auction a few days ago. Maybe you had the opportunity to lean up against one. I bet you had the same reaction I did the first time. This is no ordinary tool cabinet. That made in America quality comes through. Go to see what they have in terms of configuration, sizes, and colors at the website storelock.com. Well, the military veteran came home from World War I and needed a tractor. He needed one with a cultivator on it. So he bought a Toro tractor with a two-row cultivator, and its name, that model of tractor, is two-row, T-O-R-O. It's a Toro two-row. It served the farmer very well, and it stayed in the same family for the next 103 years. The man's great-grandson just sold that tractor a few days ago at the Meekum Gone Farm and Auction. And we understand it'll wind up at Perryville, Missouri, in the American Tractor Museum, superbly restored by Lee Sackett in Minnesota. Completely disassembled, sandblasted, and painted. And Lee told me he put that rubber around the wheels there for safety and ease of handling. I saw him drive it. Maybe you'll see it in the future in Perryville. Here's some tractors much more modern that you can see across the block at Big Iron Auctions with his weekly report. Here's Mark Stock.
Well, Max, something new to Big Iron. About a year ago, we got into selling performance bulls and bred females, and boy, do we have an outstanding offering of 37 excellent Red Angus and Black Angus bulls selling for D&D cattle out of Herman, Nebraska. Check out these unbelievable bulls with great EPDs that will all sell with no reserve on our special Tuesday sale. Then on Wednesday, folks, April the 6th, we have 1,460 items selling on April 6th. Zachary Salter in Sterling, Kansas, they have a 2011 John Deere 1990 40-foot air seeder. Howard Zimmerline from La Moline, Illinois, will sell a 2004 AgChem Rogator 864 self-propelled sprayer. Gaither Farms in Moequa, Illinois, has a 2012 Case IH Magnum 340 mechanical front tractor with 2,528 hours, plus a 2009 Terragator 6203 floater dry spreader. Country Partners Cooperative in Cozad, Nebraska will sell a 2014 John Deere R4045 self-propelled sprayer, plus they've got a John Deere 4045 dry fertilizer applicator and a Case IH Patriot 4430 self-propelled sprayer. So if you're looking to buy livestock or machinery, you can find it, Max, on BigIron.com.
This Week in Agribusiness is proud to salute those FFAers across the country. And this week, we're getting to meet Hadley Stiefvater. She is the current state secretary for the South Dakota FFA. And Hadley, what are you excited about as you look to the remainder of your term as state secretary?
Well, we only have about a month left of my current 21-22 team as we're getting close to convention, but we are super excited, and I am excited to be back in Brookings for state convention and be able to see all the FFA members again back in Brookings, and excited. That community is so important to FFA as a whole. Hadley, what was it that prompted you to get involved with FFA? My FFA advisor actually was very instrumental in getting me to start FFA. I originally joined just so I could show sheep at the South Dakota State Fair one more show, But I found out quickly that there was so much more to that, and I got involved in as many things as I could, and I've never looked back.
That is fantastic. And as you look out to the future, do you hope to stay in the agriculture industry?
I do. My future plans are to stay in agriculture through livestock research and veterinary health.
And are you currently in school?
I am. I'm a sophomore at SDSU studying animal science and ag leadership.
Well, fantastic, Hadley. From all of us here at This Week in Agribusiness, we wish you the best of luck as your term comes to a close here before too long.
Thank you so much.
Now, Samuelson Says. Insight and commentary from Orion Samuelson.
America's pork producers won a court victory this week in, of all places, the halls of the Supreme Court. Let me share with you a story that moved across my wire a few days ago. The U.S. Supreme Court, at its March 25th conference, agreed to hear a case brought by the National Pork Producers Council and the American Farm Bureau Federation against California's Proposition 12, which bans the sale of pork from hogs born to sows that were not raised according to California's arbitrary production standards. Terry Walters, president of the National Pork Producers Council, said, and I quote, "In addition to its unconstitutional rules, Walters said Proposition 12 sets arbitrary animal housing standards that lack any scientific, technical, or agricultural basis, and that will only inflict economic harm on U.S. hog farmers and consumers." For example, to continue selling pork to the nearly 40 million consumers who live in California, that represents about 15% of the pork market in the United States, producers would need to switch to alternative sow housing systems, and industry estimates for converting sow barns or building new ones to meet Proposition 12 standards are in the millions, no, make it billions of dollars. Even with farmers bearing most of the cost, consumers in California and across the nation will eventually see higher pork prices. Pay attention to this one and hope the Supreme Court rules in favor of America's producers. Be safe, be well. My thoughts on Samuelson Says.
Summer and spraying season will be here before we know it, and ag manufacturers have been rolling out some new products to better address spraying. One of those was from Fendt. Recently, I had the chance to speak with Greg Pumo. He's their marketing director about the new Rogator 900.
The Fendt 900 series Rogator is we're very excited about it. I think first and foremost, it's really it's dual position clearance machine. And I think that that's a disruptor in a lot of ways because in standard clearance mode is, let's say, 60 inches. Okay, 60 inches is standard clearance mode, and that's the mode in which most growers and ag retailers around North America are going to run their machines for crop nutrients and protectants. Now, there is later season at tassel in places like Illinois and Indiana in the month of July, for example. They're going to need 16 inches of additional clearance to get over that tasseled corn to do things like fungicides and insecticides and things of that nature. So this machine here's got you covered. So it's 60 inches, standard clearance, 76 inches for high clearance, and that's at a push of a button on the 937 high clearance unit that's behind us right there.
Does any other sprayer have this technology, Greg?
Yeah, so this is really the only high clearance rear mounted sprayer on the market with dual position clearance. So again, I think that's the reason we feel like it's a disruptive product. So liquid logic is something that we have brought from the C-Series Rogator. It is standard on this machine. It is a great feature for growers and retailers alike in terms of its ability to clean out, send product back to the tank, and prime the boom very, very fast. So those are agronomic benefits that's a feature on this machine that's standard and it stays. Another feature I'll just mention is comboability. So in 2 hours or less, you can take a liquid system to a dry system as long as you've got the equipment to do that, this is something we really worked on, bringing this product to market, because in prior generations we had a hydraulic pump that was cumbersome to maneuver out. So that's been taken out. So it's electrical bulkheads, hydraulic bulkheads, some tie down straps, and we can do that. So I think that's an interesting, and I think a big benefit to this machine. The other thing I'll just mention is really the cab. So this cab is the best cab that we've ever had on an applicator. Okay, so it's a 4-post cab, and we took it from a tractor. But in terms of the space, right, the design of the space, you can stretch your arms out, and it's a very nice cab. And so we did that. That was feedback, right? Your cab is too small, so we've upped the game there, and the buddy seat there, you feel like you've got some space as well. So I think that for an applicator, for a grower, somebody that's going to spend a lot of time there, we've got them covered. And also with the cab is there's a state-of-the-art filtration system, so it's going to keep them very clean, very safe.
The amount of creature comforts in modern ag equipment, particularly in the cab, continues to boggle my mind. It's incredible to see these new innovations coming out for farmers. Folks, thanks for tuning in. That's it for This Week in Agribusiness. We hope you'll join us next week, same time, same place, right here. Take care, everybody.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.